I'm head of business development at GoChain, and what I want to say first of all is that I'm a liar, right? I'm a big fat liar, and so as it turns out, we're actually all liars. And if you don't know the actual research that I'm talking about, this went viral a few years ago, actually, and there were several different TED Talks about this, where economists and sociologists and social scientists actually determined that we're all lying all of the time. And so we're all kind of telling these small lies or white lies to ourselves, to our business partners, to our loved ones, and often unintentionally. Or unbeknownst to ourselves. And so that's okay, right? To not go too far down that road. That's actually part of our fabric of our sociality. But in a business setting, that proposes a lot of problems. And what we want, ideally, in a business setting is a very trusted and honest, transparent environment. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. So again, when we're talking about oil and gas and supply chain, what we're talking about, again, is, and this is familiar to everybody, is upstream, midstream, downstream. Upstream is, of course, probably the most time-intensive, the riskiest, and the most costly, right? I mean, I recently was told that it costs often 100 million plus before a well is productive. That's kind of a big deal. So more on that in a second. This is the corollary that we're seeing in the marketplace. In the market research that we're doing as GoChain and the feedback that we're getting is really based on cost optimization and risk management. Right? So when we're looking at this, specifically, the feedback that I'm getting is around global asset tracking, regulatory compliance, data verification, making sure that we're not doing this garbage in, garbage out process. And ultimately, we want all of these processes to be automated as much as possible. So on the upstream side, on the E&P side, what I hear from most people most of the time is really around royalties, land rights, mineral rights, title on chain essentially is the next step of this. And it's tech extensive. It's tech intensive. It's highly regulated. It's very high risk, as I mentioned. It's costly. These are the biggest challenges. So the corollary again is that what we're looking at a global level and even a domestic level is cost and operations, time management, right? Opportunity cost, efficiency, and innovation. Well, what does innovation mean? It doesn't mean just implementing new technology. It means implementing the right technology to solve a specific problem. And ultimately doing all of these things in a compliant way, because we have to report to FERC or NERC or DOE or whomever. So this points to the actual global economy that we're actually participating in, whether you're aware of this or not. And so we're all kind of in this space where we're using and implementing IoT and AI and blockchain and big data and whatever buzzword you want to throw out there. But the liminal zone that we're in is finding a way to combine these technologies so that they're serving us instead of fitting our business to serve the technology. And that's kind of the tricky space that we're in. So what we're doing at GoChain is really this new way, this new process where we see the landscape is changing. We're not going to solve every problem, right? That's not what we've set out to do. What we're going to do is focus more on transparency and automation when it comes to supply chain. So part of the question that I get all the time is why blockchain when it comes to transparency, automation, or anything? Why blockchain? Ultimately, blockchain is trust. So back to my first point, right? We're all liars. That's what the data shows us. And so when we leave our business operations vulnerable to that, it really opens up the door for that. So blockchain keeps us trusted. It creates an honest network. And ultimately, blockchain is transparency, where it allows us to see our asset tracking, our data, our information in real time. And so this is part of what we're seeing. So this was actually research, and the number in the middle, the 77% is the big one. This is actually research conducted by Deloitte and Accenture, as you can see. And 77% of 1,000 C-level executives reported that if they didn't start implementing a blockchain solution, they would start losing market share, right? So again, they would start losing market share if they didn't start implementing a blockchain solution immediately. That's a big deal. 2 years ago, this wouldn't have been the case. 3 years ago, absolutely not. So if you're not using blockchain, if you're not thinking about this technology and actively exploring it, you're going to be left behind. This is inevitable. So what are we talking about when we talk about blockchain? And specifically, some of you are probably familiar with this. We're talking about smart contracts. And smart contracts, again, give us the way to automate and create transparency. It creates that data feed that we're talking about. It creates that network of visibility across our global supply chain, across our global businesses. And an example of this would actually be one of our partners, Red Cat. So what Red Cat has done is actually created a black box data solution. And so this is actually a drone company. And so they're monitoring oil wells and pipelines and a number of different assets, agriculture, commodities, across the board. But what they've done is created this black box solution where they're ingesting massive amounts of data and big data, large data sets, and then it's hashed, it's stored off-chain, but it's made accessible for compliance, for risk mitigation, for ROI, for reporting, for shareholders. That's a big deal. Part of this, the other bookend to transparency is automation, right? And I mentioned that. So again, it's not about what happens, but it's often what you do when it happens. We can have the most transparent network in the world, but when you see that your asset has been altered or stolen or changed or whatever the case might be, what action are you going to take? And with smart contracts, with blockchain, we have this ability to automate these functions and actually submit vendor payments, automate vendor payments, automate insurance claims, automate these processes and provide compliance data as needed. So a little number up there, right? 30 billion, just a little number. 30 billion in assets are stolen or lost every year. And that's at a global scale, for all commodities. And oil and gas is no exception for this. But again, being able to automate these functions is a big process. An example of this, we're actually currently working with a biomass company out of the southeast of the United States. And they're a publicly traded company. And so what we've done is we've effectively rolled out an entire solution for their company, for their entire supply chain network. And that's everything from ethical sourcing to their warehousing, to their distribution, right? And all of this data is reported. All of it is transparent. All of it's automated. And we're moving forward. And that's not just for compliance. That goes back to their shareholders. Again, right? So it comes back to their stock price. Remittance is another example of this at a global scale. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but the point is that whether it's a PO approval, regulation, adding or subtracting new suppliers or new service providers on the procurement side, ultimately what we want is relying on data being immutable, being verified, and being transparent. And so this kind of leads to the second biggest question that I get most of the time, and that's, do I need blockchain? Right? And that's the answer. And so it's kind of funny in a way, but and you might be thinking to yourself, well, hey, I thought this guy was going to get on stage and talk to us about why we needed blockchain and how we could use it. But the point is do you need an RDBMS? Do you need an ERP system? Do you need QuickBooks? Do you need a website, right? You could say no to any of these, depending upon how big your business is. But there are actually more important questions that we're asking as a consultancy. And this is what I call kind of the $1 million questions, right? And it's about modernizing your supply chain. So when you're talking about, where is your data controlled? How is it visible? Are there different types of data that you need? Are there different types of data accesses? Is it siloed? Are you doing manual entry? Right? If you're answering yes to any of these questions, then we should certainly be talking. You should absolutely be considering a blockchain or DLT solution, right? So this is the more important question and the operative question. Is blockchain a value add? And that's what we do at GoChain. And so we start at the beginning as consultants to evaluate with you, what are your business needs? What are your problems? What are your biggest objectives? And then we actually develop an MVP, as I mentioned, with a publicly traded company in the southeast of the United States, to develop and implement that MVP that's testable. And then we reevaluate with you to see if that actually fits your needs. And if the answer is no, well, then we go our separate ways. But in most of the time, most of the cases that we've handled, the answer is actually yes. And we refine that, we perfect it, and we actually implement a blockchain solution for those cases. So actually GoChain's flagship products, this is actually just an overview of what we've rolled out over the past 2 years as a startup. So whether it's a stable coin solution or stable asset solution for global payments and remittance, or a file storage system, as I mentioned, that allows you to store large data sets and big data off-chain, make that accessible for on-chain solutions, or a decentralized identity solution that ties individuals or businesses to the assets that they're tracking. All of these can be customizable, and that's ultimately what we do. So this is just what I want to share really quickly. We've actually got a booth in the back, and we've shared this demo over the past week. Okay, so this is a general overview. I don't want to say a crude example of a, I had to do it, I'm sorry, of a supply chain network. And so this is a very kind of stripped down example of a platform and user interface that we've produced. And so you see this, actually the status, the actual phase of the asset, the categories, so you can picture oil drums or commodities or shipping containers or anything. And one of our senior developers actually put this together for a client. And so you see this take action process, which actually changes and records the asset action on our blockchain. And this can be automated, by the way, using a web app or anything else, scanning an RFID, QR code, NFC tag. And again, that's recorded. Along with that, you get a history function with this, right? So you're talking about compliance data. This is all time-stamped, right? So you see proof of origin. You see the history of that asset in real time. That's a big deal. So ultimately, what we're doing is revolutionizing your end-to-end supply chain, and that's our objective. So we invite you to join us in this next stage of a global supply chain development, this global marketplace together. I think I'm out of time. That's all I have for you. Thank you.